Hello there, aspiring tennos. Welcome to yet another video. This one was a month in the making, so I hope that you enjoy. Well, kind of. It's the culmination of all of the other videos that I have made up until this point since the release. Now let's go ahead and take a look at what we have got. So we're gonna review each part individually. First we have Gyre, and then at the end I'll give you an overall score for the update. So, upsides to Gyre. Stunning visuals, semi-interesting mechanics, talking specifically of her third ability, more on that. And she can be played as a support, which is something we've not seen in a while, which means that she's pretty viable on a team of 4, not as a min-max in terms of in-game, but just for having some fun. Now, the downsides is that she has no defenses. She has none. All she has is a couple of electric procs and a override grouping tool. That's not going to keep you alive on the steel path where every hit is going to kill you. She used to have really good damage. Actually, on release I did a video on her and she was obliterating the corpus specifically on the steel path. Now she's been nerfed so that first up, her ultimate can no longer trigger off itself, and it was those chains that you needed in order to deal proper damage. It's also on a cooldown, which means that it can only trigger so often. In my experience, it would trigger almost 3 times a second, but that is not nearly fast enough. It would have to trigger almost 10 times as fast to be viable, and that was her main damage tool, which means that she's now completely dead. Okay, moving on. Oh yeah, also it's a 2 out of 10. Then next up, make way for the main mechanic of this update. It is the void plums, or as I call it, the void droppings. Anyways, what is the upside to this mechanic that they decided to build this entire update around? None. There is nothing. Why would you do this? What's the downside? It's medallions. It's one of the least used and most hated mechanics in the game. Medallions. They decided to take this underutilized, despised mechanic and build the entire update around it. It has a really annoying RNG when you have to farm for crest. Either you have to get a 10% chance of getting it as a bouncer reward, or else you have to find it in the mission and there will only spawn 1, remember, so there will only be 1 on every single last map you play, so you have to comb through everything. You need 10 of these. They're really hard to find. In general, it's not at all intuitive. If you're just looking for them normally, you're gonna be spending tens of hours just looking for these bastards. Which means that the level 15 helmet is mandatory if you want to play this update at all. And remember, I did this with a squad of 4 other people who were also looking for these rewards. At least 3 of us was, because the last guy was defending the objective so that we wouldn't lose outright. Imagine trying to do this on your own later on when no one is playing this shit anymore. Also, it's medallions. And for the pinions, which only drops from the void angels, if you do not have the specific bounty that you need, you cannot farm these efficiently. It is terrible trying to find these angels, and I'm not sure if they spawn at all. I've had multiple occasions where we were 4 people looking for it for 10 minutes and we could not find it. So I'm not sure they even spawn at all every time. Furthermore, on release, even in the missions when you had to kill a void angel to complete the mission, the waypoint did not spawn. And so I was running around like an idiot on stream for almost 20 minutes trying to find. I didn't even know what I was looking for, right? So I was just running around, confused as all hell, unable to figure out what the hell the game wanted from me. Also, it is boring and really long-winded. Just the pinion in of itself, you have to kill the void angel, of which will only spawn 1 per mission. And also, then you have to complete the mission, which will take at least 5 minutes. So I had to fight the same boss 15 times just to get the pinions that I needed. Thank you very much. It was a horrible and really boring gameplay experience, and I give it a 0 out of 10. Please never ever 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 do this again. Alright, but let's talk about the grind overall. It actually wasn't too bad. At first I thought it was gonna be really awful, but in all honesty, other than the frustration that came with farming the plums at the beginning when I didn't know what I had to do, which was not explained to me, I had to just experiment and look up guides by other players. By the way, it wasn't too bad. So the plum was definitely the worst part. Using a resource booster, the frags and the void gel that I needed just kind of dropped while I was doing other stuff. So it was just sort of there. Now, I could imagine that you might have to farm a little bit afterwards, but considering that you're getting arcanes while doing so, it's not too bad if you're not using a resource booster. Now, the lanterns, I was losing my mind because I would play for 20 minutes and I would maybe get one. So I figured, well, this is impossible. I'm never gonna get the lanterns that I need. However, using the spare part with the sentinel, letting it die, letting yourself die, revive, letting it die, revive, and so on and so forth, you will eventually get between 2 and 3 lanterns per run. And doing that with an exterminate, I was able to, in an hour and a half, farm out the rest of the lanterns that I needed, and I did so without a booster. I did it in the middle of the night. If you can find a squad of maybe even 2 people, this would, be twice as fast. 4 people, 4 times as fast. So that really wasn't too bad. Okay, so then again, next on the list, we now have the dormi zone or dormitories, which basically is the new player housing in the game. So it looks good. Visually, it's very pleasing, and it has a very high level of customizability, I guess. And it looks quite different from all of the other areas that we have access to in terms of being able to make our creations. So some points for that. It's kind of lore relevant, I'm sure. I'm sure that it's lore relevant in some way. And I never really thought about that as a person who owns his own clan. But for a person who wants to stay in that clan for the community, or maybe because of the items available to them, this is a way for them to still be able to sort of build their own space without having to own a dojo. So I guess that's good. But why though? Considering how many glitches and bugs and small annoyances that this released with, I do wonder why would you use, or rather spend your precious time on this. Anyways, 3 out of 10. Okay, let's talk about the Incarnat weapons, which was definitely one of the highlights of this release. Now, I've decided to talk about these. I am, however, not gonna talk about the generic weapons that was released with this update, because let's be real, most of them are mastery fodder. We have the Hespar as well. I'll just mention this quickly, which is an entirely new weapon type, but from playing with it myself and watching videos of other players using it, it doesn't look that strong, and weapons that are not strong do not see play. It being a new weapon type doesn't change that. But anyways, let's talk about the Incarnat weapons. We got the Laedum, we got the Praedos, and the Fenmore. And so the upside is that they have a semi-unique mechanic, because basically what the Incarnat mechanic is, you can think of it this way. While in Incarnat mode, the weapon is loaded and it can deal damage normally. Then when you run out of ammunition, instead of reloading normally, you have to get headshots with a much weaker version of the same weapon, which is not at all viable for anything. So it's basically inactive until you get those headshots, and then you can start dealing damage again. So it's really is just a unique reload mechanic. But I have had some fun with it, and it did feel different enough from what we already have that I'm willing to accept it as an interesting mechanic. Then we have the Laetum, which is insanely powerful in every which way. It is so powerful in fact that I'm willing to claim that it is the most powerful secondary we have in the game right now. Almost period. At least for dealing damage. Is it the best utility weapon? No, that's either the Kuvanu core or the Epitaph, depending upon which kind of build you're going to be playing. But in terms of just killing stuff, it's amazing. And the Fenmore is also pretty okay. One of the downside is that the Praedos, the melee weapon here, in of itself, it's not that good, unfortunately. Like as a damage dealer, not that great. It has some interesting utility. It's going to be my go-to utility weapon on Baruch going forward. I already also have done a video on that, which you probably will have seen at this point. I don't really know in which order these will be released, but maybe. Otherwise, we're going to look forward to that. One of the downsides, I think, is that you have to get all 3 weapons. And out of the bunch, I actually feel like the Fenmore is the least desirable, because it is not as good as some of the other primary weapons, even with all of its evolutions. And it doesn't offer any utility in the same way that the Praedos does. But you still have to get it, because you must complete one solo mission with all 3 weapons equipped in order to get their final evolution. And without their final evolution, they are pretty much all kind of useless. Still, this was pretty enjoyable. Even getting the completing the missions for the evolutions was kind of fun. So I will give it a 7 out of 10. Mainly what holds it back is the insane power creep. While it was fun to use these weapons, there are now many other weapons which are now completely useless. Then we have the focus rework, and this is actually one of my favorite parts of this update. I think they did a really good job, with one exception that we will talk about here. So first up, there are way more focus schools that are viable now. Before, it was the case that ZARIMAN if you didn't need energy but you were using a melee, otherwise you would use generic. And for some very niche meme builds, you might want to use protective dash. That was about it. Now I want to say pretty much all of them are viable to some extent, and they each feel a different niche. Picking one school, I often found myself going, but then I have to give up on this other thing instead, which is a good thing. It means that in terms of power, they're almost parallel, and also most of the nodes have gotten a boost in terms of how good it is, just to catch it up to the modern era of Warframe. That's all very good. I'm also happy to see that generic is finally being dethroned. It just is not fun if there's only one focus school that's worth using. Now, one giant downside, and remember, I'm not an Eidolon hunter. I don't do Eidolon hunting, but I do know how it works. I've been lurking, and I think it's cool what they've been doing. I don't know why they were assassinated like this. It's really weird. Void Strike, you used to be able to build up infinite damage. Not that you would build up damage infinitely, but you would build up enough damage that you could one-shot the limbs of the Eidolon. You can't do that anymore, because the most you can get is 1,000 times damage, which that's not good enough. And also, for no reason at all, it's on a 40-second cooldown. You already sacrifice all of your energy in order to trigger this, so you must have full energy to get the effect, and then you can't use your operator afterwards efficiently, but you also get less damage overall. So the 3x6, where you kill 3 Eidolons 6 times in one night, is probably dead, and that's incredibly sad. I don't know, it just didn't seem necessary. The same thing with the Wisp, just is not necessary. The new transference static really sucks. You already were not encouraged to use operator for combat, but at least before you just get knocked back into your Warframe. The main reason why you wouldn't do it is because the operator deals a very small amount of damage compared to your Warframe, and also they have really low defenses. The fact that you now gradually lose more health and shields every time you get transference static means that you're never gonna use it, and at 4 stacks you just die instantaneously. So Voidsling is really slow, but you know, fixes are coming, so I won't really complain about that too much. Let's go ahead and get an overall ranking here. I'm actually giving it a 7 out of 10. I think this has really improved the experience of the use of focus schools going into the future. Again, if they hadn't done that weird thing where they killed Eidolon hunting just because we don't like it when people sit invisible, well, you're not really playing the game anymore, are you? So why you gotta ruin it for those of us who are? But anyways, if they hadn't done that, then it would have been a 9 out of 10. But that really holds it back, so yeah. Anyways, moving on. Okay, then we have the Eximus Rework. Holy hell, do I have a lot to say about the Eximus Rework. I have so much to say that I'm going to talk about it a second time, because I've already mentioned this once on my channel. I'm not done yet. My opinion at that point was still a little bit on the fence. Now I know exactly how I feel about it. So what's the upsides? Well, the upsides is that Eximus units are no longer a joke. They are actually dangerous. Their effects are could potentially kill you, at least some of them. But you also have more counterplay to those abilities at the same time, which makes it way more interactive. So that's probably worth some points or something. Also, it's now way more obvious which enemies are Eximus units. Just looking at the health bars, you should be able to spot an Eximus in a room, which is fantastic. But also just in general, they kind of light up in a way that makes them really obvious. Downsides. Oh boy, the downsides. First up, the Disruptor, Eximus, the one that will drain your energy, is terrible to play against now. Constant magnetic procs. They're really hard to see in the middle of everything going on, especially if you're aiming at something. You're not looking at your feet at all times, and it's just this hard to see purple ring around you. And even then, if you don't start moving immediately or bullet jump into the air, it's gonna hit you. It's really tough to avoid. You sort of have to see it the second it spawns, and you might not be aware that a leech has spawned around the corner on a different map. So the thing is that if you're not moving constantly and never backtracking at all, expect to have your HUD and your visual experience destroyed by a magnetic proc and lose all of your energy. If you need to go into your operator for even a second, expect to lose all of your energy. If you get knocked down at any point, expect to lose all of your energy. I've already said this once and I'll say it once again, this is ridiculous. This needs to be way more obvious and we need to have more time to avoid it. Or at the very least, it should not be able to hit the Warframe while we're not inside of it, because it will spawn underneath it. So not moving your Warframe constantly, that's not possible. Anyways, Overguard is not a challenge, it's just really stupid. The Warframes that didn't depend on CC were some of the strongest in the game already, and therefore they don't care about these enemies being CC immune. Some of the Warframes that really had to struggle and which offered a bit more of a challenge when playing them, they can't be played anymore because they relied on crowd control to survive, which means that every single last Warframe that did rely on CC to survive has now been executed. You know, a lot of the Warframes that had not seen play for years, which saw a renewed breath of life with Gloom, are now dead again. And, you know, if you main Limbo, first up, I hate you, but also I feel kind of sorry for you because, well, you're really gonna suffer this time around. Whoa, anyways, let's go ahead and give this thing a score, shall we? 0 out of 10. Unless Overguard is reworked to no longer prevent all CC, this is the worst thing that has ever happened. It has literally removed all joy I have from playing this game, and I've never wanted to quit more than right now. So yeah, really terrible. Okay, then we have the new missions, or I guess bounties, because that's mainly how you're gonna be playing them, I think. Unless you specifically want to farm out Hespar, which is a really bad idea, but you know, you do you. You should buy for platinum from other stuff that you farm. Anywho, so the new missions. Upside, it's new content. We like new content, or do we? But it is new content. It incorporates operator combat. Downsides, it incorporates operator combat. Because the operator is not very survivable. The shields help a lot, but if you cannot burst down the enemies that you have to kill with your operator before a stray bullet catches you after the shield gate goes down after a certain amount of time, you just die instantly, and that's more transference static. It's not great. It doesn't really work that well right now. I don't really see operator combat being useful at all. Even against the Eximus units, dealing the maximum amount of damage I can with my amp, it still is more efficient to just shoot them with my gun. Anyways, once you're done farming the exclusive rewards in this area, there's little incentive to come back, both in terms of reward, but also in terms of gameplay. Speaking of, mobile defense number 7 is Armageddon. It is just mobile defense. The turrets are kind of meaningless. Now there's some people that will probably say, well, they do kill an enemy once in a while. Sure, go ahead and check out Blight, which is a tower defense mechanic that was incorporated into another game where it didn't belong at all, but where they executed it well. It is in Path of Exile. Once you watch that, you will probably feel very disappointed that this is what we got. Also, I'll say that Void Flood and Void Cascade is not much better. It just feels like busy work and running around rather than, you know, an actual challenge. We got more Exterminate missions for some reason. And we got no survival mission. We got these fun alternative game modes instead. Maybe farming lanterns would not have been so painful if we've just had that survival instead. It's a lot more basic work. Now with that said, I do actually give this a 4 out of 10. And that's because these are actually my favorite bounties so far. Now, I still think that regular missions are superior, and the main reason why these get such a high ranking is because they actually come the closest to the normal missions that we already have in the game. So it's one step backwards. I wish they would just stop with the bounties. We don't need more open worlds. Please stop. But still, it wasn't too bad. It wasn't necessarily enjoyable, but I wasn't really that frustrated with the game modes themselves either. So I'll give them a 4, which is really 3.5, but I don't give 0.5 scores here. So, whoops. Anyways, moving on. Okay, finally, with all of that said, with all of my reasoning done, I'm gonna go ahead and give this update a rating. Are you guys ready? Here it comes. Ba-dum-ba-ba. So the thing is, I don't actually really consider the Incarnat weapons or the other weapons or even Gyre all that much when ranking this update. A little bit I do, because of the experience is obviously not unimportant, but I mainly look at what this carries into the future. The idea of the Incarnat weapons are pretty cool, and I wouldn't mind seeing more of them in the future. It does give us more opportunities in terms of builds, and I like having more options. But mainly I'm gonna focus on the reworks. We have the Eximus rework and we have the focus school reworks. The focus schools are really cool. They've given us a lot more viable options, which essentially is giving us more options. But then we have the damn Eximus rework, and I don't want to have to use the arcane that prevents magnetic procs in every single last mission on every single last build. But I feel like I have to right now because the insanity of the magnetic procs that's happening constantly, which is just so unfun. And the thing is, they don't need line of sight. They could be around the corner. It really ruins like all and any enjoyment I have of the game. And I know they're working on some kind of fix right now, but if they don't touch this at all, I don't feel like coming back. So anyways, 3 out of 10, have a better day than me.